Dieter Bongers, my former colleague and my friend and an activist, and oftentimes a Gestalt troublemaker, I must say. Someone I respect a lot, and someone who I love, and someone who supported me, who has supported me over the last couple of years, where I was going through some very difficult processes as a person, and he's also a Gestalt practitioner in Belarus. What is important for me is that Dieter is a therapist oriented towards social change. He is actually capable of finding roots, of finding connections in different situations, and it might seem that you know, a split, a rupture is the only possibility, but roots can nevertheless be found. So Dieter, I look forward to your presentation.
So thank you for your kind words. And thank you, Martin, for your presentation. Dank u wel. Let's see if I can work with my PowerPoint. Let's look. I have problems too.
Share, please. Screen share.
So here you have the program, but I don't. It doesn't. Okay. Can you see this?
Yes, of course.
Okay. So I will do a look back on the history of Gestalt and the issues of migration and homelessness in a lot of our ancestors, and I think this is an important issue. So I'll talk about Fritz, Laura, Paul Goodman, and Joseph Zinker. And first I start with the history of Jews. Not all of you might know that a lot of the founders of Gestalt were of Jewish origin. For example, in some countries where I taught, they didn't know, and they didn't talk about the background of Fritz, Laura, and Paul Goodman. And so the whole history of Jews is because of migration and trying to be creative and creative assimilation in other countries. So one special situation was in Eastern Europe. Here just, for example, in the end of the 19th century, 900,000 Jews...
Прошу прощения, мне кажется, что на экране другой слайд, не тот, который бы хотел Дитер показать.
Exactly, we can see a screen, but we can't see your slides.
Okay.
Będzie łatwiej, Dieter, jak...
Yes, it will be easier, Dieter, if you actually stop sharing, because we can see your bank. So what you need to do is to run the presentation on your computer and then click screen sharing.
Okay, let's try that. So now I have to go into Zoom and I cannot.
I was thinking that the Sparkasse Bank was somehow part of the story that you were going to tell, but it
Ja też.
proved otherwise.
Yeah.
Да, было сложно связать это с Перлсом.
So can you see it now?
Сейчас видно тебя, и ты хорошо выглядишь.
O, teraz coś chyba się uda.
Yes, something has emerged.
Can you see the slide?
Jeszcze nie? O, teraz.
Да, сейчас все хорошо.
Yes. we got it.
Yes, we've got it.
Okay. So some technical problems are always there. I just wanted to give an example for that especially in Belarus and for all the Polish people listening, they know there were hundreds of Jews in Poland, and there were 900,000 Jews living in Belarus around 120 years ago. And they had a big number of synagogues in Belarus, around 300. So a lot of history is destroyed during the Nazi work in Eastern Europe. So let's go on here. Some information about Fritz Perls. Some of you might know, some of you might not. The father of Fritz Perls was a low-class trader. He thought himself as an assimilated Jew. That means he only did religious things on very high holidays. The mother, Amelia, was very fond of Jewish tradition and passionately interested in literature and arts. During World War I, Perls was an officer in the German army, and he was a apolitical person, but he witnessed a lot of senseless killings and anti-Semitic tirades of his superiors. He began to develop a political consciousness during the First World War and the time after. So this is the younger Fritz and the old one. What was interesting is Fritz Perls had a lot of supervisors during the time that he was studying psychoanalysis. And in 27, Perls met Wilhelm Reich in Vienna and visited his technical seminars, and later he did a training analysis with Reich. And Laura said that he was far the best of the therapists Perls had. So it was a very big influence on Fritz Perls by Wilhelm Reich. So I'm Yeah. Can you see the picture? It's an old film from Fritz in California.
Nie,
Let's see.
nie widzimy,
У меня
Dieter.
не видно.
Może też
No,
spróbuj...
Dieter, we can't see it. If you could do the same thing, copy the link, please. Open it on your computer and only then share the screen. So now you need to stop sharing, copy
Yeah.
the link, and only
Okay,
then can you start sharing again.
Let's go on. It's not so important. You can watch it on YouTube yourself. So let's go on. Okay. I don't know what that is going on. Okay.
I like to feel I share with you a certain amount.
So now,
Halo, halo, Dieter? O,
Yes.
coś się zacięło. Czy będziesz nadal chciał udostępniać ekran?
So do you still want to share your screen? Okay.
You can read this.
Jeszcze chwila. O, teraz widzimy.
Okay, yes, we can see it now. Thank you.
Okay, doc. So this is the Gestalt prayer, what would have been in the movie. Most of you might know it. It's a little bit very special of Fritz, who is more distanced to the client than Laura Orwell was. It's interesting to discuss, but I will go on. See, this is Fritz with his mother and two sisters. The mother and the sister, they were killed by the Nazis. And here's some information about Laura Perls. Came from Pforzheim in the south of Germany. She came out from a wealthy Jewish family and was a model example of assimilated Jews. She spoke several languages, had read all the classic books and played the piano. His father was a Jewish middle-class man, and he became successful, a jewelry factory owner. So this is an early picture when she was in her 19 or 20s, and Laura some years later. And Laura was studying in Frankfurt, and she was very much into Gestalt psychology. She knew much more about that than Fritz. And since 1927, Fritz and Laura were a couple. Some of the writings has to be attributed by Laura, but they always were a call made by Fritz. This is an old-fashioned pattern that they had from other Jewish families. Inspired by Reich, Perls became more politically active, and he was lecturing at the Marxist Workers' School in Berlin. Reich was a member of the German Communist Party, and both of them were in the anti-fascistic movement in Berlin. And so as the Nazis getting to power, they were in big danger. Laura said about the January 1933 that there was always a lot of anti-Semitism in Germany, and the Prussian military tradition too. So from one day to the next, they decided to emigrate. It was too dangerous. They didn't go back to their apartment, and Fritz went to Amsterdam with 100 marks, and Laura went to Pforzheim with the daughter Renate. So that's the beginning of the big migration process. In October 1933, they emigrated to Johannesburg in South Africa and founded the first psychoanalytic institute there. Fritz himself identified himself as a psychoanalyst in that time. And during the Nazi time, though it was just 12 years, Laura Perls' mother's sister, brother-in-law's niece were all killed in a concentration camp. And during the Second World War, Fritz again was a medical officer, a psychiatrist in the African Army, and where he worked until end of war in 1946. So it was the same role as in the first, but in a different country and a different language. So again, after the World War and the beginning Cold War, the political conditions in South Africa changed. The apartheid system took over the power, and once more, Fritz and Laura, with both children, Renate and Stephen, emigrated, and they arrived in Montreal, Canada in July 46. And we could say some years later, in the 70s, there was a political change again in the United States. The Nixon era started, and Fritz Perls bought an old hotel in a lake, Covington in Canada, to open a kind of kibbutz, Gestalt kibbutz there. So the whole life after 33 was full of migrations and getting accustomed to new culture and new situations. Here, Nancy Amond Lyon got the diaries of Laura Perls, and she made a book, Timeless Experience, about all these thoughts and poets and short stories in the migration. And I have here one. The theater was bankrupt and the puppeteer has disappeared. The puppeteer has joined the army. He wore a uniform, but he didn't find comrades. He went into a battle, but he met no enemy. He carried weapons but found no target. He marched aimlessly, was not hungry, slept without being tired, played a weak role in a play that had yet to be written. Was strangled by invisible threads drawn by callous fingers. This is a quite depressive picture Laura drew about her man at that time. So the next one in this row is Paul Goodman. He described himself as a conservative anarchist. And he did not migrate, but he had some special life that is important to know. As a militant pacifist, he refused military service in World War II. And he was thrown out in a lot of groups and organizations he was in from the anarchists because they didn't follow his ideas of militant pacifism. They thought it was to be important to fight against the Nazis. Here's some pictures of Paul. New York was the largest Jewish community in the world at that time. Wealthier Jews of German origin, and the father was a successful antique dealer and shareholder. But when his wife was pregnant with the last child, Paul, he emigrated to Argentina with his lover. And Paul said about that, "I'm a fatherless boy who cannot follow the normal ways." So in a way, this is an unstable situation that Paul experienced from the beginning of his life. So what I had to add, because the organizers are now from Lodz, Joseph Chaim Zinker was born in Lodz, and he lost the family in World War II, and was at the end of the war he was in a camp for displaced person, and came after the war to the USA, and he spoke Russian, Polish, English, Yiddish, some German, and a little Hebrew. And very important, the books he wrote, Creative Process in Gestalt Therapy and In Search of Good Form. I learned a lot by Joseph, and even he grew up in the United States. He always had a European accent in his English, and he had a lot of citations of other languages, not being identified really with being a US citizen. So some theses about what are the psychological consequences of migration. So we could look around and the Jewish tradition about centuries, and we could look for all the people that were migrants in the Second World War. But what we can say, it's takes away stability from the psyche. The background is losing language, losing friends, as Martin said, losing the parts of the culture, and having to be assimilated in a very new and sometimes hostile field. So what often happens is to get some disorders, anxiety or panic disorders, or what I have found often in this histories is addiction. So some have a positive side. They develop creativity, what was very important to be a new country and new culture. Some are really great in learning foreign languages. After a few years, you don't even hear an accent. And so for some Jews, they were often excellent artists and writers. So there is a chance, if you really can assimilate in a new field, but there is also a lot of diseases and a lot of things that are burdens in your life as a migrant. So one more thing to mention is what happens with the human sexuality. And Martin said, if you try to survive, you have not the chance to develop all the possibilities of human existence. And fear and paralysis does not raise the energy for erotic feelings. Core survival functions do not provide intimacy. So it's some people told me about their situation on migration, that they felt like in a part like frozen. Parts of their inner processes were frozen, and some mistrust dominate the field. So what I see with some refugees live without sexual intimacy for years. So this is just survival training. So this is an interesting issue we could discuss more about, but this is just a few theses. So here are 2 books if you want to learn more about this. Bernd Botschan has written a book, Fritz Perls in Berlin, and Nancy M. and Lyon, A Timeless Experience, about Laura's unpublished notebooks and literary tests. So this is my lecture. Please react, ask, comment, whatever is important for you now.
Спасибо большое, Дитер. Предлагаю задавать вопросы, либо делиться комментариями. Мы получили комментарии на украинском.
Thank you, Dieter. We have a comment in Ukrainian from Oksana. Thank you very much. Very valuable. I haven't noted migration and forced migration so much before, but today I look at it differently. So thanks to this, I managed to arrive at some important conclusions. Lena, Oksana, I think, is writing that previously she wasn't aware, or she didn't consider the refugee experiences of the founders of our method. I think that's what it was about. So yes, indeed, very valuable and something that gives support. This feeling that the creators, the founders of our method were migrants and they experienced so much. This is somehow crucial in the context of our conference and the topics that we are dealing with here.
Mm-hmm.
There's a question in English to Dieter.
Hey?
Do you know? Okay, I see it.
Question from Inga Dieter, asking, do you know anything about Perls' work in the theatre whilst he was in Berlin?
Mm-hmm.
And Inga says she thinks that this is essential in Gestalt.
Yeah. So yes, he was very interested in theater when he was in Berlin. There were a lot of very famous theater people at that time. Most of them migrated because of the Nazis. And he was in contact with Jacob Moreno, the founder of psychodramatic therapy. And Perls really confessed that some of the methods he used, he has taken from Moreno and from the existential theater in Berlin in the 30s. I can see now chats today. Okay.
Коллеги, у нас есть еще пару минут. Приглашаю появляться, включайте камеры, задавайте ваши вопросы на том языке, на котором вы говорите.
We still have some time left, so if you have any questions, please turn your cameras on and ask your questions in English. Dieter, do you have your English channel switched on? Do you hear the interpretation?
Yes, I can hear you very well.
Inga pyta, gdzie można przeczytać więcej?
Inga asks, where can she read more about this? So I assume this is regarding the previous question and his ties to Moreno. Any further literature here?
Yes, and the book of Bernd Botchan about the Perls in the 30s. This is where it's in German and English, and I think it's they translated. I don't know if it's in Russian, but it in Italian. So and about Moreno, I did a workshop together with a therapist from psychodrama, and we told some of the history. He told what Moreno told about that, and I told what Fritz was worried about. But I don't know if there is something you can read.
There's another question from Christina Dieter, thanking you first for the presentation, and asking whether Fritz Perls has a particular take on homelessness. Did he write or work?
Well, Fritz was, I would say, a driven character when he arrived. I don't know so much about the time in South Africa, but when he arrived in the United States, he was the marriage with Laura was not very happy anymore, he was driven. He was running around the country. He had a lot of affairs with younger women, and he was not very good in stable, longer relationships with other friends and gestaltists. So what we could think, it's there were he was traumatized from the First and the Second World War and from the migration. So he when you read what he's written in that time, the comments from Laura were always more supportive and more full of love. And if you look at Fritz, he was a lonely old man at that time.
There's thank you. There's perhaps a follow-on question from Fanny who asks, how do you think the forced migration of Gestalt therapy's founders have influenced and shaped the theory of Gestalt therapy? So where does this loneliness and isolation manifest in our theory?
Mm-hmm. So, for example, I showed the Gestalt prayer, and I think this Gestalt prayer isn't a very wise thing. It's just if we don't meet, it can't be helped. This is a little bit autistic, you know. If we don't join with a client in a process in the beginning, we should not say it can't be helped. We could try once again and on another way of joining. You know, when you read about the life of Laura in the United States, and she got back to Germany in the 70s. She was a lonely woman, and she lost her husband, and she used to read German books and German poems to feel more at home. She was not really integrated in the United States, though she was important for the New York Gestalt Institute, you know. And so there is these first generation had a hard life, and Stephen, the son of Fritz and Laura, said that he, as every young boy in the United States, he played football, and Fritz never ever visited a game where he was playing. So we could say this is, we can call him a lousy father. And I think this is influencing the early Gestalt theory. He was good in confronting, but he wasn't very good in supporting and giving love.
Дитер, хочу выразить свое удивление и получить твой комментарий на него. Фриц...
I'm surprised, to be honest, because Fritz didn't write so much about migration. As for his national identity, he never commented on this topic and never spoke about this. What can you say about this?
Well, I didn't write about, didn't have something to read about this from Fritz himself, but Paul Goodman was in conflict with Fritz, especially how he treated his wife. Laura always tried to be in more contact with Fritz, and she wanted him to take care more about the children. But he wasn't very much in his role as a father, as a parent. Paul did the speech at when Fritz had died. Paul was the one to have the speech at the funeral, and he wasn't so kind what he told about Fritz. So I don't want to blame him only. You know, if you were in your 20s and you were a doctor in the First World War with all the killing and all these cruelties, it's today we could say this. He was traumatized. So we didn't talk about that earlier, but I'm very sure that he has a trauma from the First World War.
There's a couple more comments in the chat, Dieter. Paulina suggests that maybe this plays into the fact that Gestalt therapy is still more isolated as a modality in comparison with psychodynamic or person-centered approaches. And there's a comment from Oksana in Ukrainian, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Lena.
So I think the confrontation part, I learned a lot from Fritz when I saw the film, when I read the protocols. But I think now, as we know more about trauma and the consequences of war and migration, we should be more wise.
Дитер, Оксана из Украины спрашивает, проводишь ли ты обучение?
Oksana from Ukraine writes, how do you train on migration? If you live in Germany, do you live in Germany? Or if you live in Germany, what plans do you have? What training on migration do you run in Germany, if any?
Well, I'm originally German, but I live in Switzerland since more than 30 years. And Switzerland has 1/3 of the population. They have a migrant background from France, from Italy, but from Ukraine and Russia and from everywhere. So I would not say that we really train about migration. It's quite normal to be in a field with a lot of people with other languages and other cultures. But there is, like in other countries, a lot of resentments against people from other cultures. So even German and Swiss German are very close together. It's for me as a German living in Switzerland, it's not easy. In a way, I'm a migrant too. So the English people might know that from English people living in Scotland. They are foreigners.
Я думаю, Джон об этом лучше знает.
Yeah.
Ну что, Дитер, нам уже пора заканчивать. Я хочу отметить, это тоже...
Okay, we should wrap things up.
Что мы с Дитером вместе в комитете ЕГЭ...
As a word of comment to Oksana, to Dieter and I are on the International Committee for Human Rights, and in September we're having a conference during which we will talk largely about migration amongst a renowned group of speakers, and on the website you can find a lot of information on this September's conference. Thank you very much, Dieter. See that the topic that you've touched upon has evoked a lot of discussions. Thank you. We're about to start our lunch break.